Welcome to Question Mark, the podcast, exploring the greatest story ever told with open minds and open hearts.
We light it up, we won't come down, and the sun can't stop us now. Watching it come true, it's taking over you. This is the greatest show, where it's covered in all the colored lights, and the runaways are on in the night. Impossible comes true, it's taking over you. This is the greatest show.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome again to Question Mark, exploring the Gospel of Mark together. Some say it's the greatest story ever told, and the more I read it and the more I talk about it with my guests, the more I believe that actually it is the greatest story. I hope you'll agree too when you listen to this podcast about one small passage of this amazing story. Today I've got a great person to introduce to you, a man who I can absolutely sincerely say I admire. And I just would recommend, if you ever get a chance to look at some of his work, please do. His name is Jason Hildebrand. And Jason, welcome. Welcome to Question Mark. It's wonderful to have you on the show.
Thanks so much, Stephen.
Can I ask you, just tell us all a little bit about yourself. Why have I given you such high praise? What's going on?
I don't know. Why have you done this? Yeah, well, I'm so excited to be here with you. We were chatting earlier, and I was telling you that I have a special place in my heart for Southampton, where you're from. So I'm an actor by trade, by training. I have been doing solo and duo theater performances of scripture and God stories for close to 25 years. And so when I heard through a friend of ours that what you were doing, I looked it up immediately, watched it, bought your film, watched it, loved it, and was so excited about it. And I have a place in Southampton because I performed there in a couple of churches and had really an encounter with God in Southampton that was very transformational for me. But my background, I'm married for 26 years and have 4 kids from university age down to grade 8, or I don't know I never remember the UK. So 13. He's 13, the youngest.
13, yeah. Okay, year 9 in UK.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're all at home right now because of the pandemic. So it's been a fun 2 years. But I have a theater company called Jason Hildebrand Creative Arts, and next year will be our 25th season. And so we do kind of theater and film work and media work, but really all centered around the notion of bringing the presence of God through the presentation of story, especially scripture. And so I'm always interested in story and the way that narrative and story touches our hearts. And we were also talking about earlier, but I don't even know who I heard it from, but I love the probably not technically scriptural word Jehovah sneaky. And I'm not, maybe it's in there somewhere, but I find that, with work that with scriptural performance or presentation, I find often God sneaks in the back door of people's hearts as they encounter him through the story and really does a transformational work. And so I'm always interested in that. I'm always interested, and always for myself too. I'm, as much as I want to offer it out to people, I selfishly, I think I'm like, oh God, what are you going to do in me? And sometimes that's scary and horrible and makes me have to do a lot of work. And sometimes it's just magnificent and full of joy. And so you never quite know what you're going to get. I mean, I have my very first show in a similar fashion to what you do with Mark is on the life of David. And I'm still touring that show after 25 years. But at some point in the performance, and often in multiple points, God will speak to me, or I will perform a certain section a way that I've never done it before, and I've done it hundreds, maybe even thousands of times. I don't even know, a lot of times. And it'll always just wreck me. It'll just wreck me inside in the best possible way. And inevitably an audience member will say, oh, when you did that section, that certain section, that was really moving and transformational for me. And I'm like, well, I've never done it that way before. And obviously God had something to communicate to you, because I'm not that clever to come up with doing it a certain way. And so I love that. I love that. My company is very much about getting underneath the surface of story, very much about allowing Holy Spirit to come and be present in our midst, and let God do God's job, and I'll do my job, and that will get things along much better than me trying to be clever and do God's job for him, because I'm not good at it.
That's wonderful. What you've just shared, and we were talking about this earlier, just so resonates with me, Jason. I feel like I've found a fellow who understands what I'm going through. It's not necessarily something that most people go through when we're on the stage and we have to do this thing. But it is so true what you've just said. And it's something about, I think we were talking earlier as well, about using our bodies as well, somehow putting life into the words through our physical movement actually brings an even deeper kind of understanding and appreciation of scriptures. Would that be something you would agree with?
Absolutely. I went back to school a couple of years ago and did a master's degree, and part of my thesis was around engaging with the body. I mean, I'm a pretty heady kind of person, but the Lord was really speaking to me, and I don't mean like audibly. I mean like, deep in my spirit. Although it'd be nice if he spoke to me audibly. It doesn't happen very often. But he was really speaking to me about the notion of us being triune beings. So the notion of us being created in the image of Father, Son, Spirit, and we are created mind, body, spirit. And the thing that I really felt he said to me, is says, my church is missing part of my gospel because they don't live in their bodies. Wow. And so I've been reflecting on that for a number of years now, and wondering how then can I allow God to be fully present in my triune nature? And it's tricky business, because we always default to one thing or the other. But I think there's something about inviting the spirit, or breath as it's known, the ruach as it was in the beginning, right? I think the interesting thing about breath and body is that in the very beginning of Genesis, it actually doesn't say, the Hebrew doesn't say God spoke. It says God exhaled. He breathed, and all things were created. Which is,
he breathed, and then the words "let there be light," as it were.
Right, exactly.
Hey.
But the initial impetus was that the spirit ruach came out.
Yeah.
And the words came out of that. But there's something. So how do we then, as performers, but how do we then as human beings invite that breath to be present in us? And I think that the interesting nature of human beings is that the oxygen that comes into our bodies actually flows all the way through our bloodstream, all the way down to our toes. So I had a professor in university who, when he breathed, you could actually watch his feet like expand and contract. The breath was so evident all the way down into him. And I began to think about, what does that mean, in terms of allowing God to actually inhabit us, like not in an intellectual way, but in an actual way, so that we are fully dialed in or connected to the Spirit of the living God as we receive Jesus. And so it's been, I as a performer and as a writer and as a human being, I've really been trying to think about, okay, Lord, teach me about what it means to be fully alive, mind, body, spirit in you. Not just my brain thinking thoughts, but my body responding. It's like, I think a bit of it like being a dancer or an athlete, where you just, my daughter is a distance runner, and I see her, she actually feels, she's almost 16, and she feels the presence of God. Like, she says that to me, like, when I'm running, Dad, I literally feel the presence of God in my body. Yeah. And I think, isn't that interesting that when we become aware in that way that God is in us, that we can sort of encounter him in a new way. And And so I'm always I'm all about or all about learning how to invite people into that place of encountering God in their full being.
Yes.
And I certainly haven't figured it all out. Goodness no, but I think it's really exciting. And Jesus was such a model of that. Yes. Over and over again. He was so present with his Father. And doing it through the Spirit. That's actually something. Oh, we didn't even have a discussion about this earlier, but I've been thinking about that a whole lot. This idea that, so I'm working on a new play right now called Jesus Stories. Okay. So it's really exploring Jesus as a human being. So we think of Jesus as God often, or we just go to Jesus as God, but we don't really often think about like he was fully God and fully man. And so what does it mean for Jesus to be fully human? And in the same way, at the end of his life, he says, I'm going away and you're going to even do greater things than me, which is mind-blowing because he's God. So how does that even possible? But I've been thinking about like, what does that mean if Jesus as a human being limited himself to only do what the Father said through the power of the Spirit, and that same Spirit lives in me, what then can I do, not in a me being clever way, but in an obedience way, to then impart or breathe or live God into my circumstances, into my story, into my world. And so, the show has to do with Jesus as a human being, and then also Jesus engaging with people on the margins, because you doing Mark will be well aware that he's always hanging out with the margins people, and he's grumpy with the people, with the religious people.
Yeah, the people at the center, the powerful ones.
That's right. It's right. So anyway, that's me rambling on about what's going on, but I'm just.
That's so exciting. Yeah. I can imagine there'll be a pile of creatives listening to this podcast going, yeah, but actually I'm hoping there'll be loads of other people who will be recognizing what you're saying. I've not personally heard that teaching before, but it so resonates with me. It really does, Jason. So thank you for sharing it.
You're welcome.
So we're going to be looking at just one small excerpt of Mark's Gospel, as I said earlier, and it's chapter 3. So what I'm going to do is allow two things to happen. If you're watching on YouTube right now, everybody, you'll see an excerpt from I Am Mark, the film that Jason's just been mentioning. And if you're listening on a podcast, you'll be listening to my friend Lucy, who'll be reading the passage for us. So this is Jesus being accused by his own family.
And then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered so that he and his disciples weren't even able to eat. And when his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he's out of his mind. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, your mother and brothers are outside looking for you. Jesus answered, who are my mother and my brothers? And then he looked at the crowd sitting around him, and he said, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and my sister and my mother.
So there we have it, Jason. As I've been thinking about this passage, and I've been receiving some thoughts from people who listen to this podcast, what seem to me to be 4 fundamental questions keep coming up. And it might help everybody if I just go through those. And what we'll try and do is maybe give some thoughts to each of them and see what we come up with. So here they are.
Love it.
So I think one of the key things people often wonder is, what does take charge of him mean? And why would Jesus's family want to do it anyway? And the other thing that's come up, a friend of mine wrote in and said, why are they standing outside? Why didn't they go in to get him if that's what they wanted to do?
Right.
And then, of course, there's the question that Jesus asks, Jason, and it's the one, I guess, which is central to this passage. Who are Jesus's mother and brothers? Jesus says, who are my mother and my brothers? That's a really interesting question. Mm-hmm. He has an answer for it, but I think we need to explore that a bit, because that seems to be the key of this passage. And the other thing that's really noticeable, and people mention this time and time again, not just with this passage, but with several of the others in Mark, it seems to be split. I mean, it's really nice to read it that way. You have the family, and then suddenly you go to another camera shot, as it were, of the teachers of the law, and then back again to the family. He's kind of sandwiched the family a bit here, and as I say, he's done it. He does it several other times in the gospel and other parts of the story. And I've learned enough to realize that when Mark does that, it's not just accident. It's not just because he's trying to make it into an exciting narrative, although he probably is. There's often a theological thing going on.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Beneath the surface. Well, but anyway, that's a question that has come up, that, why the split narrative there?
Yeah.
So there we have it.
There's one more question that I always want to know. My question is, why is Jesus never eating? The poor guy, his disciples must be so grumpy all the time. They're like, Lord, every time we sit down to dinner, you're teaching. Like, can we just not sit down and have a meal? For crying out loud.
Absolutely. It is true. Why doesn't, this particular passage, they haven't got enough time.
Right.
And can you actually, I can't actually get my head around that. To be so busy, if that happened to me, as you said, I would get really grumpy.
Yeah, I'm very hangry.
Very, very angry. But to be so busy is so intense. How did they do it? How did Jesus do it?
I think that's why he's always sneaking off to be by himself. I think as he's hanging out with his father, he's like, Lord, can you just can I have some manna? Just give me some manna, Lord. Just wondering, anything, whatever you got, just put it in the burning bush, and then we can roast it. It'll be like a nice quail, some pheasant. I don't know, but
I've never thought of it that way. But now I can understand that might be true.
It's a midnight snack he's sneaking away from, both physically and spiritually.
Yeah, he certainly needs the spiritual stuff. And it's fascinating, when I used to read Jesus prayed all night.
Yeah.
And now I realize he really did. He had to.
Right.
There was absolutely no time in the day to do anything.
Goodness.
But he had to have that connection with his father, didn't he? That was like the key for him. As it is.
So beautiful.
Yeah. Amazing. Anyway.
Sorry to sidetrack you there. I was thinking about the food. It was the food, right?
Absolutely. Why first of all, let's go back to the family. Okay.
Sure.
I know this has come up in a previous podcast, to be fair, but I think there's plenty still to look at this. And since we are going to be focusing on the family in this podcast, and we didn't do that in the last, I think it's worth revisiting a couple of verses that we looked at last time. And here it is where it says, they took charge of him, and it says, for me, I just, that phrase, take charge, it's like, it has a sense of violence about it. It's not nice. It's not pleasant. It's something else. I just wondered what your response was.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts, and it feels a little bit like, okay, Jesus, we need an intervention. Like, it feels like they're showing up for an intervention. All right, Lord. Yeah. All right, son. I know everybody's gonna we have to do something so that it's not going to become a mess, so I wonder if the family's coming for the little intervention moment with him.
Are they looking at it from the point of view of, we need to do this for his own good, or are they looking from their point of view, we need to do it for our good?
I kind of go back to the way Mary responds. So Mary's such I just think Mary is such a fascinating character. The mom, Mary, his mom.
Yeah.
And there's a, I mean, she has, when Jesus is born, or when the Spirit comes, Gabriel comes and says, "Hey, you're gonna have a kid." She has this incredible, like, faithful response.
Yeah.
But we see her next at the wedding in Cana, right after the Christmas story. And what is she doing? She's like got it. She's got the whole wedding under control. She's running the wedding.
Yeah.
She's like telling Jesus what to do. Okay, you're gonna do something, right, Jesus?
Yeah.
You're gonna do it. You're like, she's in control of the situation. And I mean, I actually love that moment because she changes Jesus' mind.
Yeah.
Like, she really does. Like, mom, it's not my time. Like, it's not my time. And she kind of looks at it like, Jesus, it's your time. And he goes, oh, okay. And he kind of changes his mind, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But I always feel like Mary's a little bit of a control freak. Like, she's had to be, because her, everybody, she finds out she's pregnant, she's not wed. She's got to kind of contain her situation all the time. And so she's continually trying to, and you see it kind of throughout all the Gospels, where she's kind of trying to get Jesus to do what she wants.
Okay.
So I wonder if it's, and she knows that she doesn't understand maybe how it's going to shake down, but she knows what Jesus is in for. She knows who he is.
Yeah.
So is she trying to protect? Maybe she's trying to protect him from the crowds, or from what's coming, or that motherly. Little bit like, what's that passage? Is it in Isaiah where, like, I long to gather my people like a chick under the wing? That whole thing.
Yeah.
So I wonder if she's a bit mother henish, where she's like a little bit kind of like, I gotta deal with him.
That's fascinating. That's really fascinating, because my last guest was a deacon in the Catholic Church, and for him to accept that Mary might be kind of in a place where she's trying to stop Jesus, prevent him achieving his destiny, it doesn't work for him. I don't know whether he speaks for the whole Catholic Church. I'm assuming there will be people who would agree with him in that particular tradition. And so for him, she was going there for the ride. She was happening to be there, but she wasn't an instrumental part in the stopping Jesus kind of activity. That more likely his family were, the rest of his family, whoever they were. And I can understand that. But to be honest, what you've said makes me wonder whether Mary, she was like us in, she was a human being who vacillated. I think we vacillate. I can imagine those moments when God announced that she was going to give birth to the Messiah, like a time of, incredible fear and awe and ecstasy and all sorts of emotion. But that's not to say that she retained this sense of, positive spiritual dynamism.
It's still her boy. It's still her boy.
Yeah.
It's like my boy, right?
Yeah.
It's that motherly, what can I do to protect my kid? And can you imagine? So you show up at this party, so you're tracking with him. I wonder, I mean, his brothers or his family really didn't get on board till later on, did they?
That's right.
So you've got, like, Mom, you got to do something about Jesus. Like, he's embarrassing our whole family, as if we weren't already outcasts enough. Like, deal with this guy. Just deal with him. But I wonder, they show up at the house, and that's kind of part of your second question. And it's stuffed. They can't even get in. Like, there's, and they're on the outside. And Mary's like, I wonder if it's like, I have to protect my boy. So, like, somebody get in there and tell him we're here, and, like, he's got to come with me now.
Yeah.
And we won't have it.
You've made her out to be a very human character and very understandable in that situation, actually. I mean, I think there are other ways for me. Where I've done my own kind of thinking about this, that I just keep getting the sense of the fact that the hint is here that they think he's delusional, because it says he's out of his mind. That he's lost it. He's completely lost it. I think there's a degree of, if I had a member of my own family who was suffering such mental illness,
Right.
then yeah, I would want to stop what he was doing, take him home, take him away from whatever he was up to.
Well, we don't, and James, Jesus' brother, doesn't get on board till later.
That's right.
Right. None of the brothers get on board.
Yeah.
Or till much later on.
Yeah.
What after the resurrection, I think.
I think the key thing is that they don't see it, do they? They don't know. They don't see who Jesus is. No. They don't understand. They've got completely a misconception of who he is, and in this case, they think he's off his rocker.
Yeah.
And I mean, and to be fair, Jesus is getting in trouble already with the authorities. They're already out to get him. Earlier on in the chapter, the Pharisees and the Herodians were conspiring to kill him. So, the family were likely to be implicated in that sort of bad press as well. So there are all sorts of dynamics going on here.
And it's not like these are big communities. Like these are small, like colony, like towns where everybody knows each other.
Yeah.
Even the larger ones, everybody, oh, you're that family or this family, or you're related to this person and that person. So it's, yeah.
And of course, when you're in that kind of community, the family means so much. It's like, that's the value an individual has. He's part of a family. They don't live like we do. We have our families, but it's not that sense of, the honor of the family is implicated by our actions. What I do tomorrow won't affect my mum and my dad necessarily too badly. But for this kind of situation, this culture, whatever an individual does has a huge impact on the reputation of the rest of them.
And can you imagine Mary's conflict? So she's got Jesus and she sees what's going on and she doesn't like what's going on, but she knows what's been prophesied. She realizes the miracle of the whole thing. But her other kids are like, our brother's a nut job. Like, you need to deal with this. You need to pull him out and get his head straight and like stop embarrassing us. So she's got this push-pull tension of like the very real understanding of what God has told her. And is that true? And is that, like all the stuff she must be wrestling with. And then you've got the other kids who are not on board. So her heart must be torn.
I think you have really described well what is likely to be the case. I don't know.
Sure.
But for me, other explanations which say, oh, she was kind of dragged along by the brothers. She didn't really want to be there. She's perfect. She understood that Jesus was doing his work and she wouldn't have wanted him to interfere. I'm not sure. I think that
all the way through, the journey. She keeps popping up.
Conflicted. Yeah. Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
wow.
The question that we have maybe still to look at a little bit more, although I think you've answered it to some extent, is why do they stand outside? And what you said earlier was, well, they couldn't get in. And I think that's right, because every time Jesus speaks, the room is full.
It's full.
And people they aren't able to get in previous times that Jesus talks in this way. So that is possible.
Well, that's evident in the story where they have to lower the paralytic man through the roof. I mean, the place is packed. They can't get in there. So likely packed outside with their heads sticking in the windows too. The like maybe one window that's in this, structure that they might be in.
Yeah.
Very, very. So, I don't even know if they could push their way through in a crowd like that to get to, I mean, I don't even know how they got the word to them about it.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah.
How would what are they sneaking around the back and whispering through the dirt wall? Like, I don't even know what's going on, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe they did, and maybe someone at the wall heard and passed the whisper back to the front where Jesus was. Who knows? I have to say though, Jason, I think this word outside is quite interesting, and I'm glad that person who wrote in mentioned it, because it not only appears twice in this passage. If you look at it, it appears twice.
Right.
But it's mentioned again, and there's I don't know if you remember it, but in the next chapter, Jesus talks about people on the outside. So I can see if I can find it.
Yeah.
In chapter 4, verses 10 to 12. When he was alone, the 12 and the others around him asked him about the parables. He told them, the secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to those on the outside, everything is said in parables, so that they may be ever seeing, but never perceiving, and ever hearing, but never understanding. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven.
Oh,
And
that's a hard that whole
hard saying. It's
oh
a hard
my gosh, I don't even know what to do with that saying. But
I don't know either. It's terrifying, isn't it? But actually, if you think about the story that we're kind of looking at today and the story of Mark as a whole, it is about people who are on the inside, and there are people on the outside. And the outside guys are the guys who just do not get Jesus. They do not get him, and they're not only not getting him, they're actually actively hostile against him. And nothing Jesus can do or say makes any difference. So there are the high priests, the teachers of the law, most of them, and they clearly don't see who Jesus is. Whereas there are people on the inside who are maybe the less powerful, we were talking about earlier, who do. So there is this split, is there not?
Yeah, you know what's coming to my mind is right at the end when he's being crucified. Isn't it interesting that he invites John to take care of his mom? Like, so John is in, right?
Yeah.
He's in.
Yeah.
And he makes an invitation saying, you know, this is your mom. This is your son.
Yeah.
This is your mother, right? Like, there's is that it's John, right? Am I screwing that up?
Yeah, that's right.
But it's fascinating. I mean, this is just thinking out loud, but it's interesting that she is conceivably on the outside in this particular thing.
Maybe.
But he makes an invitation for her to come to the inside with John at the crucifixion before he dies.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's so much more that happens between this passage and the crucifixion. I understand that, but it's I think there's something beautiful about that invitation in.
Yeah.
Right. In that invitation in that last moment before he lets go of his human body.
Yeah.
That there's something about him, like with all of us, like it's never the end, right? God is continually drawing all the time, all the way to the end.
I agree, but I have to wrestle with this, and I don't know whether that's clearly what's going on in Mark's gospel.
I don't know either. I agree with you. I don't know.
I just think, maybe this was, some people say the bits about the outside and the inside and all that stuff was written by Mark because he realized the audience he was writing for. In those days, there were people who were persecuting them and giving them a hard time. And there are people on the outside who are hostile. Maybe that's what's going on here in this story, that Mark is kind of emphasizing the fact there's going to be opponents to God and God's will. There are. And that's the fact of life. You got to accept that.
Yeah.
Whereas I would guess what we would want, and I think what we not only want, it's our experience, isn't it, of God. He never closes the door.
Right.
He never closes the door. His invitation is always there for us.
And even this last sentence, whoever does God's will is my brother and my sisters and mother. So he's even saying that, see, the door is open, people. Yeah. You're categorizing it by like genealogical lines over here. Yeah. And I'm opening that kingdom idea up to the human race, like to humanity. And so like my mother and my brother and sisters are included if they want to be.
Yes.
And so are you.
Yes.
Here you go.
Exactly.
Like in the end, we're all the same before God.
Yeah.
And there's an invitation for all of us to step into that.
Yeah.
But
there's something There's something really quite radical going on here. And I hesitate to say this, but do you know what this passage reminds me of? It reminds me of, well, if this happened today, someone had wonder-working powers, claimed he was the Son of God, and drew a series of followers who gave up their livelihoods, who left their families and went traveling around the place with him, who performed all sorts of weird and wonderful acts. And then he says, actually, you know, when it comes to family, it's your real genealogy, your heritage isn't important. You know, in that day and age, that.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah. What's important is doing the will of God. If someone was alive today and saying all those things, I don't know what you and I would think, but I think the temptation might be to think, this man is out of his mind. This is a cult. This is super scary. But you know, this is the radical nature of what is it? Am I right? I mean, this is the radical nature of what Jesus is doing here in some ways.
And it just gets weirder because he starts saying things like, eat my flesh and drink my blood. And like, there's just, it goes from strange to like even weirder.
Yeah. It's, I mean, to be able to say, using a phrase which we used earlier about faith, about jumping off a cliff, to jump off a cliff to follow Jesus in this sort of situation would have taken something. But for me, that stirs my spirit because it kind of implies that being a follower of Jesus isn't like a walk in the park, and you are being asked to do the countercultural. You are being asked to do the thing that many people would think is potentially weird, certainly illogical,
right?
You know, not very sensible, not rational, and yet it's the hope for humanity.
And isn't it interesting that the people who are actually encountering the presence of Jesus are the transformed ones, but the people that are looking at what's going on the outside, the weirdness of it, are not like, it's the people who are open, like the Pharisees and even Jesus' brothers here, and I don't know about his mother, but certainly Jesus' brothers, they are not open to encountering his presence.
Yeah,
they're not.
Yeah,
and perhaps because they're worried, they're afraid about the reputations. There's so many reasons, but who are the people that are transformed by Jesus? The people that are hungry and are open to actually receiving the presence of the living God into themselves to be transformed. Like, those are the people, the hungry people. And so I think that's why he's continually saying, I'm not going to the people that I already know. I'm going to the people that are broken and busted and recognize their need for me. You don't recognize your need for me, but I'm going to the people that desperately are crying like out to me.
Yeah. And I think I agree with that. Absolutely. And there's another ingredient. There's something about being humble as well.
Oh, right.
You know, and Jesus, I mean, that's what that now for me, the idea of entering the kingdom of God makes a huge amount of sense. He says, no one can enter the kingdom of God unless they become like little children. And there's something about, are you willing to let go of all that pride and that ego and just be aware of who I am and listen and be at my feet in humility and openness?
And being irritating too. Like, I think, there's something about when my kids were little and they wanted something, they're just like, dad. And they're so irritating. And you just want, like, go to your room. You're bugging me. And I think there's something wonderful about the innocent perseverance of having so much hunger in yourself to be changed. Like there's that kind of, like, the Lord wants us to be that. He wants us to be grabbing his cloak and going, just answer me. I love the story of the woman who was bleeding, who touches his garment. Like I love that story so much because it's all about the hunger and desire and like desperation to encounter God.
Yes.
And then it's I love that she never even actually touches his physical body. That his presence is such that she touches his jacket or his cloak or whatever, and his power goes out.
Yeah.
Like, that's remarkable to me. And there's something that I think that in all of our sophistication in our age, in all of our knowledge and wisdom and data, we think we know things. And yet when we get really honest with ourselves, when it's just myself at night falling asleep in all of my troubles, and like we recognize our lack and our brokenness.
Yeah.
And out of that place, instead of walling up, it's like, I love those characters in scripture that just go to a place of childlike desperation, where they just pursue the Lord in this crazy way. Woman at the well is such again a similar type of thing, right? Where she's all snarky and whatever, and Jesus has this moment with her, and you watch her kind of this childlike faith pop, right? Where she encounters Jesus in this beautiful way. So she goes from hardened, 4 husbands or 5 husbands, and the guy she's with now is not dating any. She's like hard. She's hard, and she's hard towards the Jesus people. Like, there's just a hardness, and then all of a sudden, this childlike beauty just pops, and she's not even a Jew, and she goes and converts the whole town, like, right? I mean, it's just incredible stuff.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about faith. It really challenges me, actually. How sophisticated am I? How sophisticated are we? How proud about our own achievements and our own sense of identity that we refuse to come on the inside here and just sit at Jesus's feet or tug at his cloak because of our need and our recognition of that.
What I think of myself, I'm thinking, as we're in this conversation, I'm thinking to myself, when was the last time when I was in my 5-year-oldness coming to Jesus? Madeleine L'Engle has this great quote. I love Madeleine L'Engle. She wrote Wrinkle in Time and many other incredible books. But she says, we are all of our ages at the exact same time. So while I'm 50, I'm also 35 and 20 and 5. And sometimes we need to be 5. I need to be 5-year-old Jason. And God is saying to me, I so just want you to come like a 5-year-old and jump up on my lap and grab me by the beard and pull me to your face and talk to me.
Yes.
And I think that's a bit of this inside outside thing too, that we're talking about today. It's like, I'm not talking about genealogy.
Yeah.
How much do you want me?
Yeah.
How much? So come and like grab me and pull me down. Like, I want to be that. I want you to be hungry for me.
Yeah.
I need more of that in me. I need to be aware and engage. My 5-year-old Jason needs to be excited about going to hang out with my Avonlea daddy.
I love it. I love that image. That's going to be really helpful to me as well. Thank you so much. Here's a question for you, which I hadn't asked earlier, but it's occurred to me because we've tackled all those other questions. Mm-hmm. I guess the one that we maybe need to explore a bit more is, who are Jesus's mother and brothers? Jesus's answer to that is those who do God's will. So here's the question which hadn't occurred to me. What does that mean? Doing God's will, exactly. If I was in that room, I'd ask Jesus, I think, well, what does doing God's will mean? Have you got an answer for us?
Well, yeah, I mean, do we go to do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with our God? Do we go to that, which is, or do we just simply go, I mean, there's just, one of the things I love, and it's kind of the under the current of all the way through the Gospels, is all the women that took care of Jesus. Yeah. So you've got the Marys, yes, but you've got all essentially all the women finance the trip, right? Like, it's not, the men are sitting around. The men are sitting around talking. The women make everything happen, right? They're going ahead. They're making sure Jesus has a place to live. They're making sure Jesus has something to eat. Like, but I wonder if I wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, and the reason I'm looking over is I'm looking at the scripture that I have before me, but I wonder if the will of God is to be in communion with Jesus.
I wonder.
Because ultimately at the end of the day, that's it.
Yeah.
And out of our communion or our relationship or our intimacy with Jesus, we understand who we are, and then we're able to move out and accomplish our day, whatever it gets put before us.
Yes.
So I don't know. Yes, I wonder if God's will is more about being than doing.
Yes. Amen. 100%. I think you're right. I think it's about what Jesus is doing here. His ministry is about doing the will of God, his mission. Well, what does that mean for him? That means, well, I guess he's fulfilling his destiny, but that comes out of his intimacy with the Father. That comes out of communion. His sacrificial sense of, Lord, I will do your will day by day, by day by day. That's what Jesus is modeling, isn't it, for us? So I think you're right. I think it's about getting to the place of saying, Lord, yeah, all my barriers are down. I'm ready to do your will. But that's a place we can only get to through relationship.
Right. And the Pharisees and I think this is true of today too. We check all the boxes. Oh, I did my this and I did my that and I did my this. And God, didn't you notice how I read my Bible and I did my devotions and I went to church and I wore a nice suit and I did all this stuff? And God's like, I don't care. I really don't care. Did you and I go for a walk this week? Did you just stop your day and ask me how my day was? It's relationship. It's exactly that relationship. I think that's what he's pointing to in this outside inside stuff too.
Yeah.
It's about relationship, people. My siblings and my family is about relationship.
Yeah.
So come join in.
Yeah. Wow.
He doesn't say that his mother, his genetic mother and brothers are not his mother and brothers.
Oh, that's true.
He's saying like, we're welcome. We're all welcome here, people. They are, but so are you if you want to be.
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
There is a fourth question, which I did forget, which is why does Mark split the narrative? So like he starts with Mary and Jesus's brothers coming to get him, to seize him, to take him back home to Nazareth. Then he suddenly moves off to another scene where we're talking about the teachers of the law and what they had to say, and then goes back to the family. I mean, is it because this is how it happened? Like, is this an actual progression of time? Right. So they started in Nazareth. It took them a long while to get to wherever Jesus was, which probably was Capernaum. And then by the time he got there, the Pharisees or the teachers of the law had done their stuff. And so the family could engage with him. Is that what happened?
I don't know. It's a good question. What do you think, Stefan?
No, I don't think Mark does anything by accident. I think he's a great, as a literature student, I'm beginning to realize this is literature as much as it is a great story and theology. And I don't think he does anything by accident when it comes to certainly his structure. And I noticed this again and again as I've kind of, performed Mark. He split things up. And it's often to emphasize something that he's doing it for. There's something about the stories have a similarity. There's a similarity going on here. And I don't know, maybe it's going back to this outside-inside thing that in some way, if you split up the story between Jesus's family, then chunk it with the teachers of the law, and then going back to Jesus's family again, and in each case, the people involved are having a go at Jesus and trying to stop him.
Right.
Then maybe he's saying something about that all of these people are kind of yeah, they're his opponents. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and yet they're all of his opponents, but wouldn't it be great if we were all brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I agree. And I love what you're doing. You're because I think I've taken this passage quite negatively. I'm thinking, okay, there's an inside and there's an outside, and there's some people, they're really, really hostile, and they're completely unredeemable. And then there's the ones on the inside, they're redeemable. That's okay. But what you're saying is, no, actually, Jesus goes beyond that strict division. It actually is about openness to all. But nevertheless, there is a condition to some extent about intimacy, about communion, about obedience. There is a condition.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, okay, everybody, you're all welcome.
Yeah.
But you have to be with me.
Yeah.
You have to be with me. So will you be with me?
Yeah.
If you are, you're welcome. I can't make you.
Yeah.
And so you just have to come.
Yeah. So it's not Jesus himself making a division. It's actually you have a choice. You have a choice. You can be on the outside if that's what you decide to do. Which is,
I think that's like the awesomeness of the gospel. He's continually going, well, I'm right here. Like, come. Like, I'm right here. Just join me.
Yeah.
And people are like, no, or lots of questions or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm not hiding. I'm right. I mean, even he says that when the guards all come, the soldiers at the end after Judas betrays him, he's like, I've been here the whole time. Like, I'm not doing anything secretively. We're not hanging out in secluded little areas. Yeah. All my teaching is out in the public. It's here. I'm not hiding. You're welcome. You are welcome. You're still welcome, which is wild.
It is. I think we've really touched the hem of Jesus' garment in this just this little part. It's been wonderful all the way through, Jason. But you've really helped me understand the gospel and the inclusivity of Jesus' invitation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this is so much fun to chat about, and I'm kind of feeling very, very challenged too. I mean, we had a discussion before the podcast about the work we create, and I think we have a little bit of our Christian culture had a little bit of an inside outside kind of framework to it, and I think moving from Christian to kingdom is a very good shift that's been happening in the last little while. Yeah. Because I think about the work, including your performance of Mark, it's really aspiring to be much like Jesus was doing, which is like, I'm not telling this story for a bunch of Christians. Yes. While I want to bless them, and here you go, I am actually telling this story first because if I didn't tell it, I couldn't be me, and because it's just in me to birth. Yeah. And secondly, I want to give this story to people, to human beings, regardless of where they are on their journey with God. Because in the giving of this story, I am welcoming them inside.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know where you're at, and I don't even know the inside outside. I don't even know how God defines that anymore. I just know when the presence of God shows up and you receive the presence of God, your life is transformed. Amen. And so the scripture and your presentation of it and my presentation of it, and even our own stories, which is a continuation of the scriptures in many ways, right, down through the ages, yeah. Is an invitation to do what God is doing. God, whoever does God's will is my brother and sisters. We're making that invitation. I hope that's what we're doing, to invite people to come into our story, come into the story of Jesus, meet him, slow down, be quiet, listen, and in that you will encounter. And the miraculous thing about that encounter is that you will be transformed. And one of the things I am in wonder and awe of is I had this notion growing up of less of me, Lord, more of you. And that's a really terrible translation. If you unpack it a little bit more, it's actually like, no, all of you, God, filling all of me. And so that I am fully alive in God. And that's the beauty of invitation is, we weren't a bunch of trash that Jesus has tried to sweep to the side. Yes. We're his dearly loved children who he wants to be with. That's what the whole point of the cross was anyway.
Yeah.
And so there's this wonder of coming, of that invitation to like, will you come with me? Will you come with me inside? And I'll come inside of you and I will make you so yourself.
Exactly.
And that's mind blowing. And I fight it all the time. I still fight it all the time, despite his grace.
Yeah.
But when I sit in that place, then I'm doing like what you suggested, hanging on the garment, like, oh Lord, please come, please. And he's like, yeah, come on. So it's the invitation. I think the Gospels are all, and it's Mark 2, it's like invitation after, like Jesus is setting up invitation after invitation after. People don't know he's doing that.
Yeah.
But this whole passage is an invitation. The end bit is an invitation. Come on, come with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you so much, Jason Hildebrand. It's been an honor and a joy to be with you. Thank you again for all you said today.
Oh, my pleasure. Stefan, I love what you're doing. Bless you. I pray that you would continue to mine this text and this work. It's so exciting.
If you enjoyed this episode of Question Mark and don't want to miss any future episodes, make sure to click on the subscribe button. This also means other people can find the podcast and join the conversation. We'd also love if you could leave a review so we know what was good and what we can improve for future episodes. Join us and our special guest next time, where we'll continue to explore the greatest story ever told together. If you want to get involved with the podcast or have any questions or comments in the meantime, please do get in touch using the I Am Mark social media channels. We'd love to hear from you.
We light it up, we won't come down, and the sun can't stop us now. Watching it come true, it's taking over you. This is the greatest show, where it's covered in all the colored lights, and the runaways are on in the night. Impossible comes true, it's taking over you. This is the greatest show.